I've been riding by this building on my way to work almost every day for the last 4 years and never really thought anything of it. Now, I have heard many different stories about how someone had heard they used to make bullets maybe or bombs for the Allied forces during World War II or something. It took me 3 years, but I finally got fed up with not knowing and hearing different, diluted versions of what people thought truly happened there. So naturally, I decided to look into it myself. And turns out, it's pretty exciting. What is up, guys? Two Wheels Online here. If you've been in Montreal recently, you're probably aware that we have a brand new bridge. And if you've ever taken that bridge going north on your way into the island, you might have spotted this building. Now, right off the bat, this doesn't really pop out of the Montreal environment, and it might just look like any other abandoned warehouse. Because it is. Or is it? It was a military boat factory. Torpedo speedboats, to be exact. Now, to understand why we needed speedboats along the St. Lawrence River, in Montreal, in Canada, when the war was in Europe, we need to know a bit more about this guy, Admiral Percy Walker Nelles. In 1909, at the age of 17, in preparation for the launch of the Royal Canadian Navy, Nelles enlisted as a cadet in the fisheries. I didn't know what the fisheries was, so I looked it up. And these guys, they protect fish. But a year later, in 1910, the Royal Canadian Navy was officially founded and he enlisted. He became a senior midshipman on one of Canada's Navy's first two ships, and then, in 1930, he was aboard a ship set to Bermuda on a 3-month tour of South America's Atlantic and Pacific coast, and their captain died unexpectedly. Nelles was then appointed acting captain of the HMS Dragon. He was the first Canadian officer to command a British Royal Navy vessel. He did a bunch of things for the Navy. Now, back in Canada in 1939, at the start of the Second World War, Admiral Nelles was made aware of German U-boat sightings along the Canadian East Coast by some fishermen. As it turns out, those particular sightings were later ruled out as false, but at the time, it was enough to alarm the Admiral, and based on his experience in the First World War protecting transatlantic shipping routes, he thought the primary naval threat to Canada would come not from the Japanese on the west coast, but really by the Germans on the east coast. Meaning this very building, strategically placed along the Lachine Canal connected to the St. Lawrence River, would provide most of the naval equipment to defend eastern Canadian coastlines, where the Germans were more likely to strike if the war had gone differently. Having found the ideal site for defense, Nelles partnered up with this guy, Hubert Scott Payne. He was a British aircraft and boat designer who had previous experience in this kind of stuff, having founded the British Powerboat Company. Scott Payne knew that coastal waters and rivers would make ships vulnerable to land-based bombers, and what was thought to be U-boat sightings made the need for fast patrol crafts a priority, and he proposed using motor torpedo boats based on his racing designs. They made a bunch of ships. Here's a partial inventory I found. According to this map I found online in the Montreal archives, the building was built and in use by the Canadian Powerboat Company by December 1940. Now, don't tell this to anyone, but after spending hours looking this up and downloading old hand-drawn maps of Montreal to find the address and learning about all this, I kinda had to go visit. Of course, we know today that the war never got to the point where Canadians had to fight on Canadian grounds, but if they had, this is where almost all of the naval equipment would have come from. From what I can tell from the pictures, they assembled the boats on the second floor and lowered them with pulleys in an artificial reservoir connected to the canal. And since a lot of men were in Europe, they had over 400 female employees. We can see them here working in the workshop. In 2011, someone proposed to make this a landmark, stating that the Canadian Powerboat Company building was identified by Parks Canada as a Level 1 cultural resource of national historical importance, which is pretty cool for an old abandoned building nobody talks about. About a year after I started researching this, the city of Montreal unveiled future plans to reinvent itself. Those plans included the transformation of this 28,000 meters squared, long since abandoned building in hopes to revitalize the sector. Ironically, the military strategic position of the site next to the canal, which is now connected to a bunch of other Montreal attractions, makes the location attractive for a cultural hub. The history of this place is super interesting, and it's annoying that in order to know about it, I had to research this on my own, based on what seemed at the time like nothing more than urban legends told by coworkers. And World War II was only like one old person ago. This should be known. In any case, I really hope you found this as interesting as I did. The sources will be down in the description below, as well as the websites for the plans the city has. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one.